The Last Login Part 1. The maintenance worker's gambit Zara Chun's. Wrench clattered against the metal grating as another tremor shook. Mining station Omega-7. The fusion reactor's harmonics were off again, creating vibrations that rattled through the station's skeletal frame like a death song. She wiped grease from her hands with a rag that had seen better decades, her dark eyes reflecting the amber warning lights that painted the maintenance shaft in urgent hues. "Another one bites the dust," muttered her supervisor Marcus, his voice crackling through the comm system. "Kithara just finished off that hotshot pilot from the Centauri Defense Force. Lasted 12 seconds new record for this week." Zara's stomach twisted. The Nexus simulation had become the galaxy's most watched blood sport, broadcast across every inhabited system. Warriors, soldiers, and glory seekers lined up for their chance to face the Void Render in virtual combat, convinced they'd be the one to finally defeat her. None ever were. The maintenance tunnels around her told a different story than the gleaming command decks above. Here, among the humming processors and recycling units, reality was pipes that leaked, circuits that sparked, and artificial gravity that occasionally hiccuped. No glamour, no glory, just the unglamorous work of keeping thousands of people alive in the vacuum of space. Her personal communicator buzzed with an incoming message. The sender ID made her hands tremble. Conscription office, Kithara's fleet. Attention, Kai Chun, ID 7739, showed exceptional tactical awareness during Nexus trial. Report to recruitment station Alpha Prime within 72 standard hours for military induction. Kai, her little brother, barely 17, had entered the simulation 3 days ago against her desperate pleas. She'd thought he was safe, thought the neural feedback from losing would send him home with nothing worse than a headache and wounded pride. Instead, he'd impressed them enough to be drafted into the very war machine he'd tried to defeat. Fingers traced the rough metal of the maintenance shaft walls. She'd spent 5 years learning every bolt, every wire, every system on this station. When the artificial gravity failed, she knew how to reroute power from the tertiary generators. When the water recyclers clogged, she could rebuild them blindfolded. When the neural simulation pods in the entertainment sector glitched, she'd been the one to fix them. That was how she knew the Nexus wasn't just a game. The neural interface technology was the same stuff used in therapy pods, memory enhancement chambers, and deep space communication arrays. It was real technology, doing real things to real minds. The recruitment message continued. Cadet Chun demonstrates natural three-dimensional tactical thinking and resistance to conventional psychological warfare. Assignment pending. Resistance to psychological warfare. The phrase stuck in her mind like a splinter. What had Kai done in that simulation? What had he resisted? Marcus's voice crackled through the comm again. "Zara, you still down there?" "Got another reactor fluctuation in Section C." "On my way," she replied, but her mind was already elsewhere. The entertainment pods were 2 decks up, their neural interfaces identical to the ones used in the Nexus. She'd repaired them hundreds of times, understood their protocols better than anyone on the station. If she was going to lose her brother to Kithara's war machine, she needed to understand what had happened to him. She needed to see what he'd seen, feel what he'd felt. She needed to enter the Nexus herself. As she climbed through the maintenance shaft toward Section C, Zara Chun had no idea that her decision would reshape the balance of power across the galaxy. She was just a maintenance worker trying to save her brother, armed with nothing but a wrench, a stubborn streak, and an understanding of three-dimensional space that came from years of crawling through the guts of a space station. Sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. Part 2. The Unlikely Warrior. Neural interface pod hummed with barely contained energy as Zara settled into its cushioned interior. The station's entertainment deck was deserted at this hour most. of the mining crew preferred their escapism in liquid form at the bar 3 levels down. Here, surrounded by the soft blue glow of dormant simulation equipment, she felt like she was preparing for surgery rather than entering a game. Neural pathway calibration complete, announced the pod's AI in a voice designed to be soothing but somehow making everything worse. Please state your desired simulation environment. The Nexus, Zara whispered, her voice barely audible above the pod's cooling systems. Warning: the Nexus is a high-intensity combat simulation with known psychological risks. Participants may experience temporal displacement, memory fragmentation, and severe neural feedback. Are you certain you wish to proceed? Zara thought of Kai's message, probably typed from some sterile recruitment center, while handlers evaluated his potential as cannon fodder. Yes, the world dissolved when reality reassembled itself. Zara stood in what looked like the aftermath of a cosmic war. The simulation's arena was a massive space station that had been torn in half, its twisted metal sections spinning slowly against a backdrop of dying stars. Debris floated in lazy arcs through the zero-gravity environment, while emergency lighting cast everything in hellish reds and yellows. Other contestants materialized around her 6 warriors from various worlds, all bearing the marks of professional soldiers. There was Thane, an augmented cyber warrior from the Titan colonies, his body more machine than flesh. Vera, a psionic assassin from the Outer Rim, her pale skin covered in the ritual scars of her order. Captain Rodriguez, a veteran of the Centauri Defense Force, his armor scarred from a dozen real battles. They looked at Zara with mixtures of confusion and contempt. She stood among them in her maintenance coveralls, her only weapon a basic energy pistol that the simulation had provided. To keep things fair. This is what passes for a warrior now? Sneered Thane, his mechanical limbs whirring as he tested their responsiveness. The void render will be insulted. Before anyone could respond, the arena shuddered. The dying stars outside began to pulse. With unnatural light, and the twisted metal of the station started to reshape itself into something resembling a throne room. At its center, a figure began to materialize. Kithara the Void Render was not what Zara had expected. The holographic broadcasts always showed her as a towering figure in dark armor, wielding weapons that could cleave through starships. In the neural simulation, she appeared almost human-sized, wearing simple black robes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her face was hidden behind a mask that shifted and flowed like liquid metal, but her presence was overwhelming. The other warriors immediately fell into combat stances, their training and instincts screaming warnings. Zara felt nothing. The oppressive weight of Kithara's psionic aura that was making the others sweat and tremble seemed to slide off her like water. Another batch of pretenders, Kithara's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. Let us see. Which of you will last longest before your minds break? Thane attacked first, his cybernetic enhancements allowing him to move faster than human reflexes should permit. He lasted 3 seconds before his neural implants overloaded and he collapsed, screaming. Vera tried to counterattack with her own psionic abilities, attempting to create mental barriers against Kithara's assault. She managed 5 seconds before. The feedback sent her into unconsciousness. Captain Rodriguez and the others fell in rapid succession, their military training useless against an opponent who fought on mental battlefields rather than physical ones. Finally, only Zara remained, standing in her maintenance coveralls with her basic energy pistol, apparently unaffected by the psionic storm that had devastated the others. Kithara turned toward her, and for the first time, the Warlord's voice carried a note of genuine surprise. Interesting. You're still standing. Yeah, Zara replied, checking her weapon's charge level with the same casual competence she'd used to inspect a faulty power coupling. I get that a lot. Asterisk Part 3. The Impossible Victory. The silence in the arena stretched like a held breath. Kithara stood motionless, her liquid metal mask reflecting the dying light of the simulated stars. Around them, the unconscious forms of the other warriors drifted in the zero gravity, their minds temporarily shattered by psionic feedback. "What are you?" Kithara asked, her voice carrying a weight that seemed to press against the very fabric of the simulation. Zara shrugged, a gesture that looked absurd in the cosmic battlefield they occupied. "Maintenance tech, third class. I fix things that break." She paused, studying the Warlord with the same analytical gaze she'd use on a malfunctioning processor. "You're not what I expected." "And what did you expect?" "Someone who chose to be here." Zara's words seemed to hit Kithara like a physical blow. The Warlord's mask flickered, revealing a glimpse of a surprisingly young woman's face, tired, haunted, and afraid. "You know nothing," Kithara snarled, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. She raised her hand, and the arena around them began to shift. The twisted metal of the destroyed station flowed like liquid, forming spikes and barriers that hurtled towards Zara with lethal intent. In the real world, Zara would have been obliterated instantly. But this wasn't the real world, it was a simulation. And she'd spent 5 years learning to think in 3 dimensions while maintaining equipment in zero gravity. As the deadly obstacles approached, she saw their movement patterns, their trajectories, their weaknesses. She didn't dodge like a trained warrior would. Instead, she moved like someone who understood the underlying physics of the space around her. When a metal spike shot toward her chest, she used a piece of floating debris as a fulcrum to change her rotation, letting the spike pass harmlessly. Through the space where she'd been a moment before, Kithara's attacks grew more desperate, more complex. She summoned gravitational wells that should have crushed Zara, created illusions that should have disoriented her, unleashed psionic blasts that should have left her catatonic. Nothing worked. "Why won't you break?" Kithara screamed, her composure finally cracking. "Why won't you fall?" Zara used a maintenance access panel that had materialized in the arena's wall to anchor herself, then kicked off toward the Warlord with the same casual competence she'd used to cross a maintenance shaft. "Because I'm not trying to beat you," she said. "I'm trying to understand you." The words seemed to freeze Kithara in place. For a moment, the deadly arena around them flickered, revealing something else underneath, a pristine white room with walls covered in neural interface cables, and a figure suspended in the center like an insect in amber. "You see it," Kithara whispered, her voice suddenly small and vulnerable. "You see what they did to me." Zara reached the Warlord, and instead of attacking, gently touched her hand. The moment their skin made contact, the simulation exploded into fragments of light and memory. She saw Kithara's real story, a young woman named Elena Vasquez, a promising tactician who had volunteered for an experimental program to enhance human strategic thinking. The neural interfaces were supposed to augment her abilities, make her a better commander to protect her homeworld from alien invasion. Instead, she'd been trapped in the simulation for 15 years, her consciousness imprisoned while her body was used as a weapon. The Kithara personality was a construct, a shell built around her trapped mind to make her an effective warlord. Every victory, every conquest, every moment of apparent triumph was actually a scream for help that no one could hear. "I've been trying to lose," Elena whispered, her real voice breaking through the Kithara facade. "Every battle, every simulation, I've been trying to find someone who could break through the programming. But they all came here to fight, to win, to prove themselves. You're the first person who came here to understand." Zara felt the weight of that revelation settling on her shoulders. "What happens now?" "Now," Elena said, her form beginning to flicker as the simulation struggled to maintain coherence. "You help me break free, but it won't be easy. The real controllers are outside the simulation, and they won't give up their greatest weapon without a fight. Around them, the arena began to collapse as the neural feedback reached critical levels. But instead of the usual ejection protocol, Zara felt herself being pulled deeper into the simulation's core systems. "Hold on," Elena said, her voice growing. "Stronger. We're going to need each other for what comes next." The simulation's core was nothing like the battle arenas or the cosmic battlefields. Here, in the deepest layers of the neural network, reality was information streams of data flowing like rivers of light, processing nodes that pulsed with the rhythm of quantum calculations, and vast databases that contained the sum total of human knowledge about warfare, strategy, and control. Zara found herself standing on a platform made of crystallized data, her maintenance coveralls replaced by something that looked like a cross between a spacesuit and a diving outfit. Elena stood beside her, but she was no longer the imposing Kithara or the trapped young woman. She was something else, a hybrid of human consciousness and digital awareness. "Welcome to the real war," Elena said, her voice carrying harmonics that belonged to both organic and artificial intelligence. "This is where it's all been happening." Around them, the data streams revealed the truth. The Nexus wasn't just a recruitment tool or entertainment system. It was a massive neural network that had been harvesting the tactical knowledge, combat experience, and strategic thinking of every warrior who had ever entered it. Each defeat, each death, each moment of insight was recorded, analyzed, and integrated into a growing database of military intelligence. "They're not just using me as a weapon," Elena explained, her form flickering between human and digital. "They're using every person who's ever fought in the Nexus. Every military secret, every defensive strategy, every tactical innovation gets added to their collection." Zara studied the data flows with the same methodical attention she'd give to a complex electrical system. "Who's they?" Elena gestured to a massive processing node that dominated the center of the core space. "The collective. They're not from our galaxy. They're from somewhere else. Somewhere that ran out of original thought eons ago. They survive by harvesting the creativity and innovation of other species, and they've been using the Nexus to map every possible military response our galaxy might mount against them." The processing node pulsed with malevolent intelligence, and suddenly Zara understood why her immunity to psionic attacks had been so important. "You can't affect me because I'm not connected to their network the way everyone else is." "Exactly. Most human minds have some degree of psionic sensitivity. It's part of what makes us creative, intuitive, able to make leaps of logic that pure calculation can't match. But it also makes us vulnerable to their influence. You're different. You're a null mind, immune to their mental manipulations." A new voice echoed through the core space, vast and cold and utterly alien. "Incorrect. The anomaly will be corrected." The data streams around them began to shift and flow, forming barriers and weapons designed to trap or destroy the intruders. But these weren't the crude simulations of the arena. These were attacks on the level of pure information, attempting to rewrite their consciousness, delete their memories, or simply erase them from existence. Elena fought back with techniques that combined human intuition with digital precision, but she was vastly outnumbered. The collective's processing power was immense, built from the accumulated knowledge of conquered civilizations. Zara, meanwhile, approached the problem like a maintenance issue. Instead of trying to fight the attacks, she began to trace their origin points, following the data streams back to their source. "Elena, can you keep them busy for about 30 seconds? "I can try, but trust me. I've been fixing broken systems my whole life. This is just a really big, really complicated machine that's not working the way it should." She found what she was looking for in the deepest levels of the core, the original programming that had created the Kithara persona. It was elegant, beautiful, and absolutely ruthless in its efficiency. But like all complex systems, it had a weak point. The programmers had built in a failsafe, a way to shut down the entire network if it ever became too dangerous to control. They'd hidden it deep in the code, disguised as a routine maintenance protocol. Zara smiled. Finally, something she was qualified to handle. Elena, when I trigger this, the entire simulation is going to collapse. We'll have maybe 10 seconds to get out before the neural feedback kills us both. What about the collective? They'll survive, but they'll lose 15 years of accumulated data and their primary weapon. That should buy our galaxy some time to prepare for whatever comes next. Elena's form solidified, her human nature reasserting itself. Do it. Zara reached for the failsafe protocol, her fingers dancing across interfaces that responded to her touch like familiar tools. For a moment, she felt the vast weight of the collective's attention focus on her alien intelligence, so vast and cold that it made the emptiness of space seem warm and welcoming. Then she activated the maintenance protocol, and everything began to fall apart. Part 5. The new reality, the collapse of the Nexus. Simulation sent shockwaves through the neural network that powered it. As the data streams fragmented and the processing nodes went dark, Zara felt herself being pulled back through layers of digital reality, her consciousness racing toward the physical world at speeds that made her head spin. She expected to wake up in the entertainment pod on mining station Omega 7, probably with a splitting headache and a lot of explaining to do. Instead, she found herself lying on a medical table in what looked like a high-tech laboratory, surrounded by equipment that hummed with the kind of advanced technology she'd only seen in textbooks. "Easy, easy," said a familiar voice. Elena Vasquez stood beside the table, but this was Elena in the flesh, the real woman who had been trapped in the simulation for 15 years. She was older than she'd appeared in the digital realm, her face marked by lines of exhaustion and determination, but her eyes were bright with a freedom that hadn't been there before. "Where are we?" Zara asked, sitting up slowly. The room around them was part laboratory, part command center, filled with banks of monitoring equipment and communication arrays. "The collective's primary research facility," Elena replied. It was hidden in the asteroid belt of the Kepler 442 system, disguised as a mining operation. When the Nexus collapsed, their security protocols went down with it. We had about an hour before their backup systems came online. "We?" Elena gestured to the far end of the room, where a familiar figure was working at a bank of computers. Marcus, her supervisor from the mining station, looked up and grinned. "Took you long enough to figure it out, kid." Zara stared at him. "You're not really a maintenance supervisor, are you?" "Intelligence operative, Terran Defense Corps," Marcus replied, his voice carrying an authority that had never been there when he was complaining about reactor fluctuations. "I've been tracking the collective's operations for 3 years. When we identified you as a null mind, we knew you might be our only chance to get someone inside the Nexus who could actually do something about it." "You used me," Zara said, but there was no anger in her voice. She was too tired for anger, and besides, she was beginning to understand the larger picture. "We gave you a choice," Elena said gently. "You could have walked away at any time, but you didn't, because you wanted to save your brother." "Speaking of which," Marcus said, capping his communicator, "Kai's transport should be arriving any minute. Funny thing about those recruitment orders, they got mysteriously canceled when the Nexus went dark." As if summoned by his words, the facility's main door opened and a group of figures entered. Kai was among them, looking confused but unharmed, along with several other young people who had the dazed look of recent conscripts. "Zara!" Kai ran to her, and she hugged him tightly, finally allowing herself to feel the relief she'd been holding back. "What happened?" "1 minute I was being processed for military service, and the next minute everyone was saying there had been a system malfunction." System malfunction, Zara repeated, looking at Elena and Marcus. I like that. Very technical. Elena was studying the readouts on the monitoring equipment. The collective's backup systems are coming online. We need to leave soon. What about all of this? Zara gestured to the facility around them. All their research, their technology? Already taken care of, Marcus said, hefting a backpack full of data storage devices. We've got copies of everything, their plans, their capabilities, their weaknesses. The galaxy's governments are going to have a lot to think about. As they prepared to leave, Elena caught Zara's arm. What you did in there? It wasn't just about breaking the simulation. You showed me something I'd forgotten after 15 years of being a prisoner. What's that? That sometimes the best way to win a fight is to understand why you're fighting. In the first place, Elena smiled, the collective is still out there, and they'll be back eventually. But now our galaxy has something it didn't have before warning, preparation, and someone who knows how to break their systems from the inside. Zara looked around the facility one last time, memorizing the layout of the equipment, the configuration of the computers, the design of the neural interfaces. If the collective returned, someone would need to know how their technology worked, how to repair it, how to turn it against them. I'm just a maintenance worker, she said. No, Elena replied. You're the person who fixed the most important broken system in the galaxy. And something tells me that's just the beginning. As they left the facility and boarded their rescue ship, Zara Chun reflected on how much her life had changed in the space of a few hours. She'd entered the Nexus as a desperate sister trying to save her brother. She was leaving as something else, entirely a key player in a conflict that spanned galaxies, armed with knowledge that could reshape the balance of power across the stars. But, at heart, she was still the same person who understood that every complex system, no matter how advanced or alien, had weak points that could be exploited by someone who knew how to look for them. The collective had made one critical error. They'd assumed that the greatest threat would come from the galaxy's greatest warriors. Instead, it had come from someone who simply understood that broken things could be fixed, and sometimes the best way to fix something was to turn it off and start over. As their ship accelerated away from the asteroid field, Zara began planning for the next phase of the conflict. The collective would return, probably with new strategies and better defenses. But the galaxy would be ready, and she would be there to make sure their systems kept running or to shut them down if necessary. After all, she was maintenance tech, third class. It was what she did, asterisk.